evening, members of the bar here at one. Let me welcome who are online. Parliamentary reform online audience views subsequent. This is, I think it is 9 meetings with had a highly successful diaspora yesterday. Labour Party and this public consultation here at just to hear public is going to be the kinds of made by members course of the last May and consultations in June. Here to some general will be interested to oversight to communication. This Bonnie Leon interpreting community. This last few months in this. May I start to I will do what is the members of my extreme law Pedro Parliament and a attorney at law court on his right is a secretary of the Barbados Workers Union and has helped to shape workers' rights not just in Barbados but in the region and at the international level. To the right of Sir Roy is distinguished Barbadian cardiologist Dr. Richard Ishmael. And on his right, this is another face that some of us at Roebuck Street may recognize, is Dr. William Chandler. We are pleased to be here and we look forward to hearing from you. Supporting us this evening, as they have at all the public meetings, are the Deputy Clerk of Parliament, Ms. Beverly Gibbons. Please rise and be recognized so people will know. On her left is Ms. Susan Hambling, who is the working secretary of the Commission, and I may say the hard-working secretary of the Commission. Ms. Hambling, would you rise so that you could be recognized at Roebuck Street? And with the preliminary introductions out of the way, we turn to the business at hand. The matter of reforming the Parliament of Barbados. Do we need to or don't we? And if we do, what should that reform look like? Is the system such that the Westminster model has served us extremely well and we don't need to change it? Or are we now at a stage of our development in our democracy that we should develop our own indigenous model, which may very well be a template that others may use? These are questions which you, I imagine, will answer and present to us on a number of topics, and these, in fact, are just two of the issues on which we are engaging as members of the Commission. With that, then, it is my absolute pleasure and honor to invite to deliver opening remarks and to welcome the Commission to Roebuck Street, the President of the Senate and the recent winner of the Grantley Herbert Adams Award, the chairman of the Barbados Labour Party, Senator Reginald Farley. His Honor, Senator Reginald Farley.
And good evening, everyone. Welcome to Roebuck Street, 111 Roebuck Street. Very pleased, but Mr. Chairman, Deputy Chairman, members of the Commission, extremely pleased to welcome you here. Okay. Extra buzz. No, there's a larger buzz. They get the momentum. But in all seriousness, it is very important that we thank the Commission for agreeing to meet with us as one of the political parties, having met with the Democratic Labour Party. In any matter of parliamentary reform, political parties and the perspectives that they have are clearly important. Let me remind that political parties have been, for Barbados, those institutions which have helped to mobilize and harness the collective will of the people, especially against the backdrop of a Barbados which was not always democratic for the majority of its people. And it has been through these political institutions that ordinary, everyday Barbadians, intellectuals, business people, but people with a similar political consciousness, a similar vision for Barbados, have been able to pool their resources together, pool their ideas, shape those ideas into manifestos and other policy documents to put before the people, and chart their course, identify their chosen path for Barbados. It has been through these political institutions that the people of Barbados in elections have been able to identify which course they want to take, and the commitment of the responsibility of the parties then will, of course, be to follow through on those promises made. In fact, for our part, if we can make a little plug, we've always, for many elections, included in our documentation is a promises and performance document, because we believe it is important, having promised at the courtship, that you review after the marriage to see how well you have done. So political parties really are not the only important actor in a democracy, but they certainly are very important. And having heard from all of the many actors, individuals, institutions, non-government institutions, faith-based institutions, it is the turn of the political party. So we in the Barbados Labour Party are very happy to welcome you, members of the Commission, and members in the audience here to Roebuck Street, for what we expect to be an interesting and lively discussion. I have attended all of the Commission meetings on the occasions that I have been in the island. So I've missed maybe about 3 or so. And I found them very useful, very engaging, notwithstanding all of my many years involved in Parliament, both houses of Parliament, now being a presiding officer, and so on and so on. So, in terms of process, I will deliver these welcoming and opening remarks. Our vice presidents will be leading some of our presentations. There are some areas in which we want to put forward clear suggestions, recommendations to the Commission. And there are 1 or 2 areas in which our research and ongoing review activity on some matters has not been concluded, and those will be included in the written submissions that we plan to send to the Commission in pretty short order. So they may not all be on shore here tonight, because there are 1 or 2 areas where there's further research being undertaken. But we do have a full slate of views and perspectives and opinions on what the parliamentary system of the future should look like. And we, as the oldest political party in Barbados and for the vast part of the region of the Caribbean, we are pleased and happy to have this opportunity to make some suggestions concerning parliamentary reform for the remainder of this century and beyond. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to 111 Roebuck Street.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for your welcome and your words. Please let me again, just by trying to spot who is in the audience for the benefit of those online, I see MP Marsha Cattle somewhere sitting at the back. I see the Honorable Davidson Ishmael somewhere. If you would be kind enough to, there, okay, to my left, there he is. Senator Paris, the CEO of the Barbados Labour Party, is at the back. Coming further forward, I want to recognize the Honorable Kirk Humphrey and Senator Andwele Boyce. Oh, I can't see him at all from here. The Honorable Charles Griffith, if we can let the cameras pick them up, and I'm sure that others will join us during the course of the evening. His Excellency High Commissioner Glenn Clark, Barbados' High Commissioner to Canada. We will therefore, on this side, start with our opening remarks. I'm going to be your chair for the evening. Our opening remarks will be given, the Commission's opening remarks will be given by Sir Roy Trotman, distinguished trade unionist.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. And good evening to all of you, and thank you for your welcome to 111 Roebuck Street. I think that the numbers that are here are in themselves indicative of the seriousness with which you have addressed this matter, and that you are now publicly demonstrating that you intend to address this matter not merely tonight, but in any follow-up sessions that you may be having. Not more town hall meetings. We have reached a stage where we have surfeited, and we are not going to other town hall meetings, but we will be looking forward to receiving the text of the submissions that you will make. There have been many, many occasions where we have been hearing about various kinds of commissions, various kinds of consultations, different kinds of reforms. There's the Constitution Review Commission. There has been talk about boundaries and electoral commissions. We hear about judicial commissions. And we are hearing tonight from our own commission, which is the Parliamentary Reform Commission. It's a lot to take all at once. And in many areas of the public, there have been those who are skeptical, who are not able to recognize that when you have something to do and you realize that time is not on your side, we are mere mortals, and we are only limited with 70 years. We have to pack as much as we can pack into the time, because there will come a day when a man or a woman will not be able to work any longer. So do what you have to do while it is still day and you can perform to your best. Do not be put off by the numbers involved. Consider instead that we are all being guided towards the more equitable and the more just society that we have been aiming for, dreaming about, and that we are especially hopeful we will get now that we are moving towards and are operating under the cloak of republicanism. And because we are moving into that realm or into that sphere, we have to do a number of things. And they can be done because where we have the will, the goodwill that is, then we can accomplish much. I don't have to refer you to the members of the commission, except to say that I speak to you with the permission of the chair of the group. He thought that he was at home and he would give somebody who was being welcomed into Roebuck Street the chance to be able to come and talk to you face to face at the beginning stages, and he will talk to you later as well. So it's not as though I am usurping my fellow schoolmate, but it is that he is giving way to his shorter colleague, and that is the long and short of the matter here tonight. We have been working since May, and we have sought to include as many views as are possible. And we want to make sure that those you have tonight and those that you will present in writing will be part of that exercise. And we want to thank you in advance, because when we got here, we are told that even at this stage, where we were starting at 7, at 2 minutes to 7, you were still putting the finishing touches on what we expect will be great food, great cuisine this evening, as we have the food that you will present for our hearing and our delicious entertainment. I hope I'm not speaking too soon. Does review mean that we have to change? That is one of the questions that a commission such as ours would always have to be dealing with. We can't give you an answer now. We are listening to hear from you whether you think there is need for a review to result in a change, and if there is going to be one, what form it will take. But as you are looking towards that, you have to ask yourself the question as to whether the current system is a bad one. Some people say, no, it is not a bad one. But even if it works, since some say it's not bad, does it supply the optimum level of 21st century satisfaction that we are looking forward to having taken us through the rest of this 21st century and into the future? Will our children and their children, will they be satisfied that we have done the best we could at this time with what we have to make our Republican system more meaningful, more inclusive, more get-along-withable than the previous systems under which we operated? You see, I have a limited vocabulary, as you know, Reggie, and so from time to time I have to be able to make it up. Is the present system one that will meet the needs that we have? And when we raise those questions, then we have to realize that because we are especially looking at a review of the parliamentary system, that starts with a look at the very important question: is the parliament in size big enough? Or do we have too many? Is the Senate big enough, or do we need more? Should we have a Senate in the first place? And if so, how do we set about arriving at a Senate? Are they supposed to be nominated, or are we saying that they should be elected? And then, of course, in recent months, we have been dealing with the vexed question of public accounts. We have no comment on what has passed, but we know that throughout the exercise, there is that burning question of how do we manage to keep ourselves working along the very narrow line of ethics, transparency, integrity. How do we manage, by whatever we do, to satisfy ourselves and satisfy the people we serve, that we are working in their best interests? And how does that relate to issues like funding and like the Public Accounts Committee? Our firm resolve tonight from you is to hear and to respect your views. We have tried to listen to and respect the views of all. Quite naturally, when we have a final product, that product will not reflect the final views of everyone, but we hope out of what we receive to be able to synthesize what we perceive to be the best interest of everybody in our young republic. And we have been trying to do this dispassionately, with our minds fixed on the love for our country and for our citizens and for our children, some of whom are yet unborn. We consider it is imperative to hear from the establishment in all of this. And by the establishment, I mean political parties that have gone through the rough and the thin of political life in this country over the years, and which among is older and more experienced than the Barbados Labour Party. And we think that your contribution is important, and we are very happy that you have brought numbers that are representative of what we think will be the interests which your leader has shown in appointing and having the president appoint, but in conceiving of these forms of rearranging the way in which society functions so that we can have that better society we spoke about. We will continue as you help us to continue in the ordering of our national development, and that continues, in our view, to be critical, the ordering of our society in such a way that our country grows from strength to strength. In this, brothers and sisters, your input is imperative, and we look forward to hearing your presentations, and we thank you for coming out in your numbers and for the contributions we believe that you are going to make. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sir Roy. I want to indicate to you that during the course of the evening, you are going to see me on my phone frequently. It is not intended as a discourtesy, and it doesn't mean I'm not paying attention, but I am tracking the online comments so that the Commission can know what the public is saying and follow the questions being posed online. And we are also monitoring the numbers online so that you can have a sense of how many people are following. On average, 2,000 to 3,000 people watch after, but we will see how many we get online tonight. I can tell you that a minute ago we had 100 people online. We are now therefore in the hands of the Barbados Labour Party. Let me welcome Member of Parliament Edmund Hinkson. I recognize other members of Parliament earlier in the evening. He has joined us since everybody was recognized. We are in the hands of the Labour Party and waiting to hear what you have to say. Please be aware that the format is that the commissioners will pose questions to those who make presentations. We will interrogate some of your views and seek clarification if there's anything that has been an important point of discussion and we want to be able to compare your perspective with perhaps others which have been made. In that regard, let me say to you that the microphone in the center of the room is available to presenters. We ask the first presenter to go to the microphone now, identify yourself, and if there is a specific issue to which you're going to be speaking, do please let us know, or if you're making a generic presentation. Let me also indicate to you that the Commission has sent a list of 35 questions to both major political parties. The parties received the questions at the same time. The Commission is asking for written responses to the list of 35 questions which have been posed to the political parties. Are you ready? Oh, there's a microphone here. Fine. Okay.
Very good night to the, can you hear me?
Yes.
Very special good night to the, this is a little unstable. To the Commission, thank you for being in 111 Roebuck Street. Those of you for whom this is a regular exercise, those of you for whom it may be a novel exercise, we welcome each of you with the same passion to 111 Roebuck Street. It is, yeah, that's better. It is, of course, a very timely discussion that we are now having in relation to parliamentary reform. In fact, as was so rightly said by Sir Roy, there are a number of things for which this country is now having conversations, some at the level of these cabinet-appointed committees and very high-level committees, and some at the level of just town hall meetings. We find ourselves as a nation in need for conversation at this point in our development for a number of reasons. And we welcome the opportunity this evening as a party, the oldest party in Barbados, the second oldest political party in the region, at 85 years old. We feel that we are well provisioned to be able to offer some insight in relation to these issues. And so we welcome this opportunity to present to the Commission. I thank all of the members of the Cabinet who are here, the members of Parliament who are here, the members of the Labour Party, other members who are here. Of course, I speak as well and welcome you on behalf of the Honourable Political Leader and the Prime Minister of this country, also to 111 Roebuck Street. And we look forward to having a very fruitful conversation. I should also say to you as I begin that the things that we will discuss, as the chairman of the party said, that some of these things we will discuss tonight, and there are some that we will propose in writing. So this will not be the extent of our conversations, but these are the ones that we think should be discussed in this particular forum. I should also say, as I begin, that over the weekend we met at our annual general meeting, which is the highest decision-making body in this political organization, and that we canvassed these issues, and that I'm sharing with you the views of a political party that is mature and sober in its consideration. So as I begin, first of all, sir, there will be a few thematic areas that we will propose. I will call the thematic areas as I speak to them. Firstly, as it relates to political parties. The question was asked of us before, and I think the question has been asked, and I think recent events in terms of the constitution of our parliament after 2 elections has forced us to consider this question, whether or not it was asked of us, in relation to what should be the role of political parties and how should they be recognized. This Labour Party proposes that political parties should be a feature in our constitution, recognized therein. We think that is important. We believe, of course, that given what the chairman said in his introductory remarks, if we look at the history of Caribbean civilizations and of Caribbean nations, and what we know to be true in Barbados and the region, that political parties have played a major role in the social, political, economic development of this country. And as the chairperson for the night suggested, I think we also have to develop proposals and structures and an architecture that is indigenous to Barbados, reflecting Barbadian realities and Barbadian needs. So we propose, first of all, that they should be recognized in the Constitution. We also hold the view that political parties should be registered. And this is going to be a very important feature. We think they should be registered, considering all that I also said in relation to the role that they play in Barbados. There are organizations that play a lesser role that we demand as an active, right-thinking citizenry that they be registered. We feel that they should be registered as well, with very clear regulations in relation to the registration of those political parties. In our conversations, we know that we will at some point, I don't know if during the course of our written submission, but certainly we will speak to, should it be through the Electoral and Boundaries Commission, should it be an independent body that we determine should be able to do that? But we feel very strongly that they should be registered, political parties in Barbados. So as it relates to political parties, I maybe have other thoughts, but those are the few that I wish to propose off the bat. We think these are significant changes to what currently exists, but we think, given what we say in relation to the role of political parties, we are indeed putting behind what we say a structure that will galvanize in the minds of people the importance of political parties in relation to Caribbean societies. So that, sir, Chair Committee is in relation to part one. Our second thematic area is as it relates to Parliament and election to Parliament. Barbados is a parliamentary democracy, and we believe it should remain so. We have, sir, in this country, a history of doing elections in Barbados that have served the people. We have a history of doing elections in Barbados, sir. A committee, I keep saying sir. It's so used to being in the Parliament. But we have a history where we know it has served the people, even though we now reflect upon the role that political parties can play. Well, yes, we admit that there have been some progress made. There is a point at which every political party, every institution worthy of its salt needs to do some introspection, and every system needs to review itself, engage in some self-diagnostics, and determine what it should look like going forward. But yes, we think a fundamental part, even as we anticipate that we have to adapt, a fundamental part of the DNA of Caribbean political systems, and certainly as it relates to Barbados, is the parliamentary democracy that we believe should be maintained. You would have already heard in a number of conversations that we had proposed people's assemblies as a local governance model. We believe that these people's assemblies will form a very important part of the deliverance of parliamentary justice as well. And you can appreciate that at the level of individual needs, at the level of things that occur on a day-to-day basis, there is a need for a body whose main focus is to attend to those needs. I will not make the mistake that I've heard some make and to suggest that these are to attend to the smaller issues, because what we consider to be the small issues in such a conversation are really the important issues for people. And so we think if we want to advance the interests of people, that people's assemblies will play a major role in being able to advance the interests of Barbadians. We also accept that there has been no real reform for a long time, since the 70s. And we propose that there needs to be some. We support, of course, the bicameral system, where there should be a House of Assembly and a Senate. As it relates to the Senate, even though we accept that there needs to be a bicameral system, we propose that there also be some changes to the system. I think this is going to be a conversation for the duration of my presentation, where we seek to hold on to the DNA that works and release the DNA that does not work, or at least to have conversations around that. But we do believe that we need to maintain the bicameral system, but that there also needs to be some changes. And I would like to propose, sir, as the thinking of this Barbados Labour Party, that these are the changes that we propose in that regard. So we feel very strongly that we have to give a greater voice to the opposition. There is no doubt, and that view has been canvassed. It surely has been the role now of the media to act as the opposition in some regard, and persons on the street. We know that there needs to be a stronger voice for the opposition, even, sir, committee, in relation to having a healthy democracy. And we propose that we wish to do so. So as it relates to the Senate, we propose an increase in the size of the Senate. The current size is at 21. We propose that the Senate be increased to 24. And to move the opposition from 2 members to 5 members. We will increase the size, the government side, by 1, so that we do not have an overextension of the government. And the independent members would now be 6. And it is important to note that even as we do this, this is not an attempt for us to be able to make changes without consultation or to affect the Constitution without consultation, because we will still need to be able to influence at least 4 persons either independent senators or members of the opposition to be able to make such changes. But it really is a genuine attempt to be able to strengthen the role of the opposition. It has been the practice of this government in any event and the history of this Barbados Labour Party for us, where possible, as far as is natural and possible to do so, to be able to make sure that we put above our own personal interests, the interests of the democracy that has served us so well. As it relates to the Senate, in relation to the independent senators, we maintain the 6 should be a representative from business, a representative from labor, and 1 from the church, as well as a representative from the Barbados Association of Retired Persons, or an organization so empowered to represent the elderly, a representative of the youth, and a representative of the persons with disabilities, so a representative from the community of persons with disability. We believe that this will make a significant difference in not only the functioning of our democracy, but in the lives of those persons, those categories that I just referred to. As it relates to MPs, we propose an increase in the number of members of Parliament. We propose that that number could be 37 or 39. We haven't settled on an exact number, but we propose an increase in the number of MPs, and that we propose, as part of that increase, these increased parliamentarians, the new ones, will be what we refer to as national MPs. So each party can propose a national MP. So in addition to the 30 MPs that currently represent the 30 constituencies, or 31 or 32 or 33, as we evolve over time, as we do naturally when the demographics change, in addition to those, a slate of national MPs. And that those national MPs be on the ballot box like any other MP, but that persons all around the country, as opposed to just those located in a particular constituency, those all over the country would have the opportunity to weigh in on who they think should be the national MPs. We also propose in relation to that the Prime Minister should be chosen from among those 7 national MPs. We hold the view that a person who desires to lead a country should not only have the support of a constituency, but that they should legitimately have the support of a nation and of a country. And therefore we propose that the Prime Minister be taken from among those national MPs. We believe that this would add great value to the Parliament, of course, but we also believe that we would also be able to give persons in this country access to MPs on a national level, so persons feel that they can have a greater amount of persons to be able to go to and deepen in a significant way the democracy on which this country stands. We also hold the view that the qualifying age to be a member of Parliament should be 18. It is not a new view. We do hope, however, that we could convince those who were not so convinced previously to hold such a view, that the qualifying age for MPs in Barbados should be 18. And we know that in this country, persons at a younger age are allowed to do other things. But we believe if you're allowed to vote and to determine who should represent you, you have that capacity to be able to make such a determination, then it is almost discriminatory for us to say that you have the capacity to make a decision, but that you don't have the capacity to be the beneficiary of that determination. And so we propose that the qualifying age for MPs should be 18. We also canvassed this among our annual general conference, and we concluded that as it relates to members who are elected to Parliament, a person who desires to, as we say, cross the floor, should return to the electorate. And that any by-election, any person who seeks to cross the floor should be through the process of a by-election, so that if a person comes in as a Barbados Labour Party MP, or a DLP MP, or a new party MP, and that because a party, if we appreciate and accept my original opening arguments, as well as the feelings exposed by my chair, that political parties are significant in themselves, then you have to appreciate that it is also the weight of the political party that helps a person oftentimes to get into Parliament. And if a person determines to abandon that party, then they should test themselves in the face of the electorate. We also have the view that we have done a lot to strengthen the responsibility of the executive to report. As you know, we've created already 3 committees. We created the Economic and Productive Sector Committee, the Social and Governance and Policy, and the Social Sector and Environment Committee. But we also know that we need to be able to do more to ensure that we strengthen that as well. We, as a political party, and again, sir, I just want to keep making the point that these issues were canvassed for some time during the course of our last conversation. The consideration should also be made to new committees, the 3 that I've already mentioned, and other committees, so that I do not want the public to walk away with the view that we came up with 3 committees. I think as the exigencies of the moment dictate, we will be in a position to create further committees to be able to do this. And it is also important to note, I have been, as it stands, I think the first member of Parliament to bring a bill to Parliament, to have it subjected to the new standing committees, and to have the Child Protection Bill and the Child Justice Bill publicly discussed, in some ways publicly dissected, and with a view that even though there is opposition to these things, it strengthens our democracy. And so we believe that that should continue, and that we should be allowed to have further committees to be able to do so. As it relates to the executive, this will be my 3rd. Members of cabinet should come from among the members of Parliament, with no size cap on the cabinet in relation to who the Prime Minister feels the need to appoint. We believe that the times, again, the exigencies of the moment may determine that you need, as we felt in 2018, that we needed a war cabinet with an MP and a minister who had a portfolio enough for that person to get themselves involved in the weeds so that we can deliver to the people of Barbados. And that we do not think it is fair or practical, really, to put limits in relation to the size of the cabinet. And that prime ministers in this country, over time, have proven to be prudent and wise in such a determination. And that, you know, there are things that persons who are involved in the actual field, in the battle, may know that other persons may not know, and that we should not limit such a case. In relation to this as well, the executive can be made more answerable to the Parliament. Yes, we believe so. But we spoke, sir, as we had our conversations in relation to having an independent speaker. A speaker, then, as we said, it may be 37, 39, if we have the way with the national MPs, and an independent speaker. So that the speaker then rules in a way that gives persons the feeling that they're not favoring, because of their political orientation, one side or the other, and that the governance of these matters are not subject to the whims and fancies of a political party. We know that this has worked in other jurisdictions. We believe that it can work here, but it also gives comfort to Barbadians that we are taking the business of the people seriously. We also feel that a person who holds such a chair must be able to have the support, maybe not necessarily in its entirety, but surely should be able to garner the support on both sides, and that an independent speaker makes sense. We also had a number of conversations in relation to financing of political participation. The second vice chairman of the political party and myself, as well as the chairman, we discussed this at length, and I know she might want to come and support me as I make this presentation. So I asked her to come forward as well as we discuss our views in relation to this. But we feel that this is an important conversation. I am a member of Parliament. For those who've been members of Parliament, those who are members of Parliament now, those who were in the past, it is never easy to talk about these issues in relation to financing political parties, but we believe that we've done enough to suggest that this has to be looked at in a way that regards its seriousness. And so I ask the second Vice President of the Labour Party to make that presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. Good evening to members of the Barbados Labour Party. I want to say thank you for giving us this opportunity to explore, because I do consider this still an exploration of some of these ideas. We, as the first Vice Chair has indicated, we thought that in order to frame our responses, we would approach the questions provided, the 35 questions, by structuring them thematically. What we did find it useful to do in that regard was to consider the question of financing of political parties and financing of election campaigns and everything associated with the operation of political parties, together with the conversation about the questions that dealt with terms and conditions for parliamentarians and so on. And why is that? I think that we, as a country, are mature enough to be able to appreciate that there's a cost to democracy. There is a cost to governance. And everything that we are called to do in order to make sure that people have a vote, that people have a voice, and that people are included in governance, means that we have to bear that cost together. Therefore, we considered that the question of campaign finance, and as some people frame it, campaign finance reform, it will be one of those issues, commissioners, that we do a little bit more research on, look at what happens in other jurisdictions and have a written response for you. But we consider that those things have to be considered together. How do you finance committees of parliament in order to strengthen our democracy? Understanding that this is important work. How do you finance political parties? And this, of course, is linked to the question of registration. Because obviously, if you're going to finance a political party, there has to be some threshold, there has to be some trigger where one considers that a political party may receive financing when certain conditions are met. And what is the purpose of that financing? Now, we have had several conversations about the question of the Auditor General. We have had several conversations about members of Parliament and therefore members of Cabinet being able to operate with a certain level of independence in the affairs of the state. We consider that for true independence to take place in that regard, that there has to be some separation of the fundraising or of the way that elections are fundraised for and financed. That means that members of Parliament, in keeping perhaps with a new code of ethics to which they swear, would not then depend on private interests solely in order to finance election campaigns. We think that this is in the interest of the people of Barbados to have the assurance that there's a certain independence in this regard. And so we expect to very quickly put something together with respect to campaign finance to look at this question of financing governance in Barbados, because we have put it all under that particular rubric. The other consideration that we made has to do with not so much specific terms and conditions of parliamentarians, although we do believe that there's room to consider whether these terms and conditions allow MPs to function at their best, and further to that, whether it allows the country to attract the quality of MPs that Barbadians have come to rely on. I think this is a very loaded issue and there's a lot to say on it. All I will say at this point is that it is very important to me, coming from where I have come from. I think the member who is at the podium will agree, coming from where he has come from, that children of poor people can come to political service. If we continue to have a situation, or if we have a situation, which we historically had, where only those who happen to come with generational wealth that they then use in order to be able to have political success, if only those people are allowed to come to political service, then that is not democracy. And so whatever system we come up with, we have to find a way that any Barbadian, no matter the circumstances of their birth, can represent people if that is the will of the people. So I would just give those framing words, and then I think we can come with a written submission. Thanks so much.
If you would be kind enough to give us your name, please.
I am Marcia Cattle, Member of Parliament for St. Michael's South Central.
Thank you so very much. For the record, because we are keeping a permanent record, so it's important to track who is speaking. We are at 177 people online. Please continue.
So only just one last comment to make. I want to thank again the second vice chair for those comments before I hand back over to the chairman to do our concluding remarks. It is obvious that everything we have said in all of our proposals, and even indeed as we have governed since we came into office, would suggest that our genuine concern is to ensure that we deepen our democracy, and that we do so in a way that reflects the various groups that are in Barbados as well. We held the view, and we've had conversations around different systems, but that the first past the post system should remain. We believe that the first past the post system has worked in Barbados. We considered other methods. We looked at proportional representation and various iterations of it across the world, which are always very complicated. In fact, while I was in New Zealand a couple of years ago, I asked so many New Zealanders to explain their system, to watch each of them struggle and say, we couldn't possibly explain it to you. We know that our first past the post system may have challenges, but I think the last point that I would make in relation to the first past the post system and deepening our democracy is that MPs who are elected by the people have to serve their people. And that a number of the concerns that are raised is in relation to MPs. We obviously recognize that within the context, however, of the constraints. You know, you're an MP, you're a minister, you're also a member of the party, your family, and so on. It's a lot of responsibility, but people elect us to serve them, and at the end of the day, that is our first job, to serve the people. So, honorable members of the committee, these are some of the views that we wish to share tonight. As I said before, there will be other views that we will share as we submit our written proposals, and also as we continue to explore what we think is a most important conversation. Thank you all very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much. We recognize Senator Dr. the Honorable Jerome Walcott, General Secretary of the Barbados Labour Party. We recognize the Honorable Sandra Husbands, Member of Parliament for St. James South, and we acknowledge the presence of 202 people online. May we have the next presentation. Please, are commissioners minded to question? Mr. Humphrey. Minister Humphrey, if you would be kind enough to find a microphone, the commission has questions. Dr. Chandler?
It's okay, right. So I thought y'all were continuing, so that's why I didn't ask anything. So the first question I have, and good night everyone, is in relation to the numbers in the various houses, not the actual number, but whether even or odd, right? Because right now, in the House of Assembly, there's an even number, and in the Senate is an odd number. Under the proposal that you made is actually the other way around, where the Senate would have an even number and the House of Assembly would have an odd number, which I understand because if you have an independent speaker, then you can have that situation. But I just want to flag that because even numbers produce more legitimate majorities because it's harder to get a majority in an even number. It's just something you have to really think about. And that's why the House of Assembly has an even number at this point in time. It's not an arbitrary number. So it could be, so that's something that you have to consider. But the more fundamental point is this: the changes that were put forward, as the second vice chairman mentioned, will cause for an increase in cost. So the principal question, which we also put to the other party, is, do you believe that we're ready for that increase in cost if it means that we're going to deliver a better democracy to the people of Barbados? And what will the party be able to do to help the general population understand the reason for the increase in cost?
Thank you.
Perhaps you could hold a minute because Commissioner McLean also has a question.
Yeah, thank you very much and good evening. I wanted to ask a question in relation to your general reference to people's assemblies. And in fact, it ties in with the question of cost. If you could, even though you're going to offer a submission, could you give us some idea as to what that model will entail, what it would look like, at least in a general form, please?
We're suggesting, okay, the chairman is suggesting that we should put 3 questions to you, and I therefore have one, and it is on the question. Yeah, I'm going to put one. I was just waiting for you to get your note. No, he's not ready. Right, so my question then is, it relates to the issue of political parties. You talked about the registration of political parties, but did not offer any kind of definition for a political party. Should they be defined in law, or do you think the concept of a political party is understood? If a political party is going to receive financing or a subvention from the people of Barbados, would they have to meet a certain threshold for membership? Would they have to survive beyond one election cycle? How would one recognize a political party in your suggestion? And what is to stop me in an election from gathering a few friends and family, calling myself a political party, coming and holding piece of change, and that would be the end of me and my friends after the election, you know? No, you have to consider all of these possibilities. So that's why I'm asking whether you would think, what is the definition, whether they have to have a minimum threshold membership, and whether they have to be able to survive, to have survived beyond one election cycle in order to be recognized. How would you define and recognize a political party in order for the public to accept that the registration and the financing of this group of people is reasonable? We have seen political parties come and go, and we have seen one-man political parties in recent times. So these are very relevant considerations.
No,
It will probably get hotter.
It's a little warm in the building. Okay. The first question was more of a comment, I think, in relation to the size and the even and odd, and so on. These are proposals that we're making. I think the final determination still rests with the committee. But in our proposal, you must appreciate that in the Senate, the President of the Senate doesn't vote. So in any event, that kind of addresses that in a way because the president doesn't currently vote. But the cost, this is our view, you know, and the reality is when you consider the cost of not getting this right compared to the cost of getting it right, it is very clear to me that if we were to spend to increase the membership of the parliament in a way that deepens democracy, so that in the Senate, we are actually talking about deepening democracy. What is the cost? What is an acceptable cost in the minds of a person for not doing so? I mean, if we were to say that we had come here and we'd extended the Senate to strengthen the hands of the government, I could understand that, but we've actually made sure that the opposition is stronger. We've put in place mechanisms to widen the representation in the Senate. And I think that the cost, the benefits, way outweigh the cost. I think we should enter a conversation with the Barbadian public in relation to what it is that we are seeking to achieve in the Senate to make sure that we have persons with disabilities represented for the first time as a group. We will have the elderly, and these are not flippant ideas or things that we came upon glibly. The reality is that Barbados has a population now that no longer is aging, but that is aged. And so therefore these are issues that we have to make sure now, and this might be the beginning of it, but I suspect and I anticipate that as we build out committees going forward, a lot of these committees will have to have a resemblance of the structure of the society. Yes, we're going to have a conversation because it's always very easy. It is always very easy when it comes to politics or politicians to say, oh, one more is too much, or you add another person is going to increase the cost. But at the same time, we are putting in place a number of mechanisms to guarantee that we are offering ourselves a lot more accountability to make sure that the public feels a lot more satisfied and to make sure that we can respond to the people. And so I think that yes, there are going to be some financial costs, but I think compared to the cost of doing business as usual, then I think an argument can be made to Barbadians why it is important for us to be able so to do. You had a second question as well. It was the cost and that was it.
No, I think that was it on the cost.
Okay. And then as it relates to the people's assemblies, so at present, in the consideration of the conversation on people's assemblies, and I should begin this conversation by reminding those present and reminding the Honorable Commissioner who asked the question that I had the privilege of being the director of the Constituency Empowerment Councils. And that the model for the Constituency Empowerment Council, which was a constituency council in every constituency, which meant that there were 30 constituency councils, I think each made up of about 15 or more persons depending across Barbados. Two criticisms that was made of the constituency council model was one, that the persons were not elected to the constituency council, and that was certainly one of the main considerations, and that by virtue of locating councils in constituencies, you offer them a political flavor. The model that is proposed here obviously addresses those two, because we speak of persons being able to vote for who they would wish to represent them on the people's assemblies. And I will not get into all the details of this because this still has to be approved fully by the various arms of government. I just want to give you a bit of the conversation. They are, as it's proposed, they're proposing 21 people's assemblies, which is less than the proposal now compared to the constituency councils. And we propose that it would include as well, because as I said before, you can anticipate that any right-thinking administration or body seeking to represent people now needs to consider persons with disabilities, and they represent that they must have 25 community residents and 2 persons with disabilities at least, and 2 youth drawn from secondary level education in educational institutions that is located within the geographical area of the People's Assembly, and 1 youth which would be older than secondary school, and a person drawn as well from BCC, UE, SJPI, and so on. So that the conversations now around the constituency, the People's Assemblies, is 21 elected members of about 30 maximum, with a breakdown that now reflects the characteristics of Barbadian society. And Honorable Chair, late person, you had a question.
So the 21 councils with 30 people each?
With about 30 persons.
So that's 210 by 3, 630 persons?
If you say so.
Well, do the math. As my
you-
former student, I assume that you could do a basic arithmetic. But no, but seriously, 21 by 30 is 210 by 3, which is 630 persons. The question therefore, and I know as you said, you propose to submit details, but we're talking costs, we're talking systems, we're talking results. These 630 persons maximum, are these, and you said elected, are these going to be paid persons? In addition to the expansion of the parliament that as you propose?
So we propose a stipend. I really don't want to get into all the details here, though I will submit it. But we propose a stipend, as the constituency councils had also a stipend. There were 30 councils, each having 15 members each. What's that?
30 by 15?
Yes. Impress me with your math, Madam Teacher.
30 by 15 is 10, 3, 4, 450.
Okay.
By 15.
So the
Or
point
50 by
remains that the cost, but I think I link this question really and truly to the first question, which is that the cost of deepening our democracy as opposed to the cost of not doing so is really what the ultimate question has to be. Are we putting ourselves in a position where we offer greater representation to the people? And again, these ideas were canvassed, you know. The constituency council idea, as was done, and I speak of the constituency councils from an informed position because I was the first director of the constituency councils. I was involved in them. And there was some consideration, some canvassing, some town hall meetings, but there were extensive consultations on the structure of the People's Assemblies, extensive. So that what is going to be proposed ultimately, and what I'm saying to you, again, this could come, and when it gets to cabinet, there could be changes, so I don't want to get into all the fine details, but extensive consultations were held on the People's Assemblies. But we do think it would be an important part of the local governance structure in Barbados. And Madam Chairperson, your question,
You might allow me to
Please.
support on that one. The question really is, it's exactly as you say, Madam Chairperson. I made a brief reference to it in my submission that, of course, there would need to be certain thresholds that would need to be met for political parties to attract financing if it is the will of the Commission and the Barbadian people that such financing be drawn from the consolidated fund. So if we consider, for example, that you have in insurance something that's called a deductible, which is a way of saying you have to put in some skin in the game first before we put our skin in the game, that is the kind of model that might be used so that there might be a period within which political parties would need to be active and face some level of election, even if it is a by-election or perhaps a general election, before it begins to attract financing. Again, this is an exploration because we will make a written submission, but I wanted to assure you that we have begun to consider the question of thresholds, the question of how many candidates are going to be fielded in an election, bearing in mind that people are still able to run as independents. That capacity remains. But if you are going to organize as a political party and enjoy some of the benefits and attract some of the financing that may attach to campaign financing, then there's certain thresholds of membership and of candidature or number of candidates and so on that we are exploring as our recommendation. The only thing I would add to what was said before by Mr. Humphrey about the issue of cost is that I think that this forum, the very existence of this commission is helping us all to consider, or helping all Barbadians to consider, what do we want from our governance? What do we want from our members of parliament? I think that if you ask people whether what they want is greater responsiveness to day-to-day issues, and if they are willing to see that financed, that they might tell you yes. I happen to believe, and this is me speaking as Marcia Cattle now, I happen to believe that this question of whether Barbadians want to see greater responsiveness to the day-to-day issues is inextricably linked to the question of the capacity of the public service to so respond. Because obviously, if you ask a question, if a member of a People's Assembly seeks to have something done, then invariably it is some service that is provided by the government or by the state that has to respond. So it takes two hands to clap. So we can't just strengthen People's Assemblies if that is what is decided, but we also arguably have to strengthen the capacity of the public service, whatever that looks like, to be able to respond in a timely way. But I do think that if you ask Barbadians if there is value in a higher degree of responsiveness to some of the day-to-day issues, then they might tell you that there is value. Alongside that, I think that this conversation is calling for us to determine who is a member of parliament? What is the role? How do we want our members of parliament to serve us? Because surely it goes beyond fixing lights on a pastor or calling BWA to send a tanker to Halls Road, which I just had to do. Surely it goes beyond that. Surely it is in the interest of everyone to create space, one, to have issues answered in a timely way, but two, to allow members of parliament to engage on things that matter to people. When I was growing up, my mother often engaged a member of parliament on, and I saw two results as I was a child. One having to do with the flooding that was in St. Clair Bottom, because we cannot walk home from school from Belmont comfortably when it rained because the bottom used to flood. And I saw my mother make strenuous representation on that issue. The other had to do with the question of extracurricular education at the level of the community for young people, and also got response on that issue, so that her member of parliament was able to engage beyond picking up a phone and calling for a service to be done, which arguably others can do, because we have to look at whether this is the best use of the time and skills and space of the MP. We want to make sure that is done. That is not to say we're setting that aside. We want to make sure that is done. People deserve that. But we also want to make sure that people are also able to engage their MPs on issues and governance and policy, and have those interests represented in Parliament and beyond. So I think this is a question for the Barbadian people, this question of cost. Do you see the value in having greater responsiveness? And I think the Barbadian people will answer us very clearly on that, and we should allow them so to do.
Minister Humphrey, the chairman, Sir Richard, has two questions for you. May I ask how many presentations formally we are receiving this evening, and how many people are proposing to speak, so we get a sense of our time management? This is it? Nobody else is here? Okay, great. Okay, fine. Thank you. I understand.
As I understand you, sir, the proposal is to increase. As I said, as I understand you from the presentation, you're hearing me?
Speak into the microphone. I don't know.
Can you hear me now?
No, take this one.
Thank you. No, as I was saying, as I understand you, one proposal with respect to the size of the House Assembly is that there will be an increase to 39. Is that correct? And that those 9 additional members will be the one who will choose the Prime Minister of the day.
No. So we propose as a party, we said that there should be an increase in to include national MPs. 7 or 9, I said. It could be 7, it could be 9. I think it depends on where we land. But that the people of the country would choose the Prime Minister, but that the Prime Minister should be on the ballot as a national MP so that everyone in the country votes and determines who's the Prime Minister.
Okay, thank you. The second question then relates to the Speaker. You're proposing an independent Speaker that is not chosen from members of the House. What would be the qualifications for that person?
Yes, we had a lot of discussion. We had a lot of discussion around this. I think there are some basic things that such a person should have. We believe person should be honest. Person should be known to be integritous. Basic human qualities. But we also believe that such a person should have already had a role in either public life or private life or NGO life in a capacity where we can see that person has demonstrated fairness in the affairs of dealing with other people. So there must be some satisfaction on our part. We did not limit our conversations in relation to a technical job, so we did not say such a person should be a doctor or a lawyer, because as we've expressed consistently, we believe that any person should be allowed to participate in the democracy. But if a person has demonstrated leadership in an NGO body, as I see Rodney Grant is there, Rodney Grant, or some person from an NGO community, Miss Eiffel, as she led the disabled community, any person who has demonstrated leadership and fairness and has the capacity to be able to attract support from both sides, because it wouldn't be a determination made by the government, it would be a determination requiring some consensus. So those were the qualities that we felt were important as we had that conversation. But we also know that we have to give the public the assurance that the person who occupies that chair is above this kind of political reproach. That person who occupies the chair, sole and primary interest, not sole, but their primary interest must be to defend the average Barbadian for whom we are all elected to serve, but to make sure that we continue to serve that person. That was the nature of the conversation that we had.
So is this proposal reflecting the practice of the past? You're saying that we have not been well served by the speakers of recent years? No, I want to know what informed the change.
I think if we are fair, and I have had what I could call the fortune and misfortune of being in the parliament twice, and we do not have an opposition in the parliament. So I cannot speak and say personally, but we do know that whenever there is rancor in the parliament, and parliamentarians can sometimes behave that way, when there have been rancor in the parliament, many times persons who occupy the opposition side often publicly, sometimes even in the very parliament, say that the speaker favors one side. In fact, some people have been so offended by the decisions of the speaker that they've walked out and located that in political purposes. So I'm saying that to remove all doubt, but I would never cast aspersions on the people who held that chair, sir. I would be out of place.
Just a final comment, though, because it seemed that the idea that the 9 MPs will choose the Prime Minister.
No, that is not what is proposed.
So there's going to be a ballot. We imagine.
I don't know why you had that note.
So on the ballot, there will be the 30 MPs. I represent the great constituency of St. Michael South. They're listening. Good night. St. Michael South Central, Miss Gallows in the house. Anyway, so I represent St. Michael South. And when I go to the poll, only the people in St. Michael South vote for me. which is fair because at the end of the day, I only represent St. Michael South. But you've had prime ministers. I think if you speak to almost any prime minister, they would tell you that on assuming the office of prime minister, it becomes very, very difficult to be a very good MP. Because when you become a prime minister, you have, by virtue of the job, to represent the entire country. Many prime ministers don't have the opportunity to be in their constituency the way they would like, for sure. I have difficulty. I think I canvass a lot. I have difficulty. And I have one ministry and a constituency. Prime ministers have responsibilities for all the ministries and an entire country. So they don't always get the opportunity to be in their constituency the way that they would like. In fact, our prime minister, even though I think she's an excellent MP, had said while we were having this conversation that she didn't have the opportunity to serve St. Michael Northeast the way she would like and offered an apology. So I am saying that the national MPs would now be chosen from the entire country. So when you go to vote in St. Michael South, you vote for Kurt Humphrey, who will definitely be on the ballot. And who else is represented by a party for that constituency? But there would also be another person on the box, another set of persons who would be saying, I will not represent St. Michael South, I will represent as a national MP, and that person's name will be on every single ballot in the constituencies. So all 30, if there are only 30 constituencies, would have the chance to vote on those persons. And then the person who gets the most national votes then becomes a national MP. And we were saying that the Prime Minister has to be a person who can command such a majority and be able to command such numbers that they make it clear that they should be a national MP.
So I'm trying to understand this new system that is being proposed. If I am the leader of a party, would I appear on the ballot as a prime ministerial candidate? Or are you expecting me, by virtue of my extreme charm or popularity, to get such a large number of votes that it becomes clear that I am the person people want for prime minister? And have you contemplated a situation in which, let's say, you have not a tie, but that one particular party gets a majority of the votes, but that their leader does not get a majority of the votes, and the leader of the other party gets the largest number of votes? I mean, what happens then?
I think your second question stems from the first question, and I think the foundations of the first questions I perhaps need to clarify.
Okay.
And then it would make the second question perhaps, I wouldn't say null and void, but perhaps not as...
But we want to understand. We need to understand
so
the
that's what I'm saying. So the way we discussed it, first of all, the person who's a national MP could be anybody. But political parties also have to propose their national MP. So we would have 30 candidates if we so desire, the Barbados Party or the Democratic Labour Party, 30 candidates. And then in addition to our 30 candidates, the BLP or the DLP will propose each a national MP, 7 or 9. So that the person is not on the ballot as a leader, but as a member of that political party. The party that then, as it stands now, when we go to choose a leader, because you still have to choose a leader, but we're saying that when we choose that leader, that person chosen has to be among the 7 national MPs. So that instead of you going as the Prime Minister, you're going as a national MP. And if you have, for example, the question doesn't arise then where you could have a case where another person gets more votes because the person who's a national MP, when we sit down to determine who is our leader, as we do every time after an election, the public may not know, but after an election, we have to sit and say formally, we want so-and-so to be our leader. And we're saying that that person has to be, that we choose to be our Prime Minister, has to be among the names that we entered as a national MP.
But suppose that person does not get elected, or how, I mean, because you're putting forward a set of names, And you're saying, if I understand correctly, that your leader will be chosen from that group.
Yes.
But the people are voting for them. And suppose that person that you put forward is not elected. Because they may be, let's say that the 18 candidates let's say there were 18 candidates for 7 or 9 positions. I don't see that as automatic. That's my concern.
Ms. McLean, just hold on a minute. Are you saying, Mr. Humphrey, that basically the person who can be eligible to be Prime Minister has to be a national MP to win the confidence of the majority in the House of Assembly?
That's what he's saying.
Only a national MP can become Prime Minister,
That's what he
right?
said.
But you have to put on the record just to make sure. You have to put on the record so we can look back.
So, what we are proposing is this. In Barbados now, you could easily become a Prime Minister. You can be very popular in your constituency. It hasn't really happened, but you could be popular in your constituency, win the support of your constituency, but it does not reflect the interests of the country. What we are trying to do, and why we are subjecting this to this public rigor, is that we're suggesting that such a person should not only be able to command the respect of their constituents, those 7, in my example, if St. Michael South were, as they have in the past, produce a Prime Minister, well, more than twice, because it produced Erskine Sandiford and it produced Fernando Stewart. But my constituency has 7,000 people. So my constituency has 7,000 people. So what we are saying is that we feel that for such a person to have the mantle of leadership, it should be the votes of the entire country. And that the entire country weighs in on the role of the national MP. So in the Barbados Civil Party, we would have to say, these are our candidates. The person that we propose to lead us eventually in our conversations would be among our 7. And, you know, as it stands now, this is no big secret. As it stands now, we don't vote for a Prime Minister. As it stands now, we vote for a person, but everybody knows pretty much who will become the leader, because the leader of the political party at the time normally assumes the role of Prime Minister. So it is in that regard, there's still no Prime Minister on the ballot, but we're saying to further cement the democracy and to further maintain that leadership. And the truth is, we also have the view that a person who wants to lead the country should be strong enough to command the support of the majority of the country. And so that, in essence, is what we are trying to be able to suggest and to propose.
So what I'm going to say to you, please, Minister Humphrey, is to accept that I'm a slow learner and put it in writing with greater clarity so that, you know, at least the other members of the commission may have grasped it clearly, but I would like to be able to see the details in writing so that I can follow. And let me say that the commission reserves the right to put further questions seeking further and better particulars when we receive these submissions, because this is really breaking new ground, and we want to be sure that we're understanding correctly what it is that is being proposed. But we thank you for the novel ideas by which we are greatly titulated. We recognize, yes, we've been greatly titillated. We recognize that there is someone at the microphone. Madam, kindly identify yourself and we will hear you.
Yes, Sandra Husbands, MP for St. James South. I just want to give support to the idea of the national MPs, but I would like to add a slight refinement, because I went through a situation similar to what you and the chairman had identified, where we were voting at school for prefects, and obviously the person with the most votes became the head girl. The problem was that there was a girl, very nice, very pleasant. Everybody said, she's nice. So everybody voted for her. But it was not necessarily the strongest person with the capacity. So they ended up with a head girl that they wasn't quite what they had intended. And I think that was the point that was being made there, that if you have it open like that, you could end up with that. Because it could be somebody on the ballot who's really nice and everybody likes them, but nobody saw him as a prime minister, but they end up being your prime minister. So I think the refinement I would like to add to what the first vice president shared is that those who intend to run as prime minister should be so identified among the national group, right? So if you have the 7 or the 6 or whatever, and 3 of them say, well, I'm running for the position of prime minister, people can then select the person they think should be prime minister. So I think that could probably help us achieve the result that the Honorable Kirk Humphrey was trying to get, that the prime minister comes from the national, but at the same time truly reflects that this is the person people said in their hearts, I want that person to be prime minister.
There's another issue which I should like to put to either one of you, or maybe both, or perhaps Ms. Caddo will intervene again. What, in your scenario, is the role of A, people's assemblies, B, constituency MPs, C, national MPs? What would be the distinctions between the functions of these 3 groups? What would be the areas of overlap, if any? And how would the current concept of representation at the constituency level be elaborated or changed by this 3-tiered system which you are proposing? National, constituency, and people's assemblies.
Thank you. That's a good question. So, just to be clear, the People's Assemblies representatives will not be MPs. They will be persons whose role is to attend to the issues, the very parochial, local issues in the constituency, but will be elected to do so. But they will not be members of Parliament in the sense that we understand members of Parliament. The members of Parliament, the regular 30, who now occupy the House and who've done so for a while, would tell you, I don't think there is a single person who has served as an MP, not one, either before my time or during my time, that would tell you that they felt they had enough time to attend to all of the local issues as well as the national issues. So we have determined that the constituents, the People's Assemblies, the People's Assemblies would attend to a lot of these local matters. I think the point was made earlier that MPs, while we spend a lot of time doing such things, potholes, broken sidewalks, and somebody throwing garbage in the road, and so on, that we could elect a local body to be able to attend to those matters. The role of the MP, however, still remains in that there are other issues in a constituency that need certain address. I have a flooding problem in St. Michael South. We've put in place, for the first time, we have 2 new pumps. The pumps work. We've been cleaning the drains, but there's some larger issues that are still constituency related that require the attention of a member of Parliament. So those larger issues, how do I fix the drainage in St. Michael South, which is really my bigger issue, to be able to attend to issues pertaining to the roads and so on, the bigger issues, and then to create opportunities within my constituency for people to be able to advance. So that remains one of the considerations. So certainly the distinction can easily be made between People's Assemblies and MPs, and we do not want to degrade the MPs. Likewise, as it relates to the national MPs, we are proposing that there are some issues. Look, right now in my constituency, I see my constituents every single Wednesday, unless, of course, something like this is happening and I am unable to attend. And there are a number of persons who come to see me also from outside of my constituency, asking about other matters that are not related to my constituency and related to another constituency. Or people for whom there are cross-cutting issues that are better addressed by a person who would not have their own interests as their primary concern. Certainly, a national MP who is a national MP would, because to be honest with you, when I have certain scenarios, I see everybody as much as I can, but I have to prioritize the people from St. Michael South. They elected me. But a national MP is elected by all the people. So you must always feel that you have a person as part of the parliamentary democracy that we have that attends to all of the wider needs of the country. And people often feel, and I know people will say, but you have an MP. You cannot find in Barbados a constituency where you cannot walk through. And you could put yourself in a time machine and go back, even when people thought they had the best MP in the world, and go back and find where people say, I feel like I see my MP enough. I canvass a lot, and I still hear people say that they don't see me enough. So I'm just saying that it creates that opportunity, but then there's also our national MPs also then can weigh in on some of the other larger national issues too. I think, again, we're just offering opportunities to deepen the democratic process, as well as to bring different and wider ideas to the parliament as we're able to discuss these things.
So Roy has a question.
Sorry, thank you. I just wanted to perhaps bring some comfort to the chairman this evening that the question that you posed has been explored. I don't want us to give the impression that we kind of just woke up with the idea and that there wasn't fulsome debate. So I perhaps wanted to give an idea of what was the nature of that exploration. Certainly, among the concerns was that people elect a constituency MP for a number of reasons, not just because they seem like a nice girl, as Ms. Husbands pointed out. People also elect constituency MPs because we give people the vote. That means we trust them to make a choice with respect to representation. And so people often seek to elect people who can come online by their shop on a Friday, but who can also fill their eyes with respect to visionary leadership for the community, and I dare say for the country. That Bajans have enjoyed outstanding leaders at every level politically. And so it has become an expectation. And often people, in discussing who they will vote for, they're not just thinking about who they can line with. They're also thinking about, don't get me wrong, they want somebody to line with, but they're also thinking about who can go and speak and represent them. I think sometimes we underestimate the level of political engagement that Barbadians have at the level of policy. And so it was a concern that was raised in our discussion. What are we doing to the role of the constituency MP? That was a consideration. And therefore, because we all in this room and across Barbados have to be concerned with the future of political participation, who are we attracting to political service? Now, we want to make sure that we attract people who also want to have policy engagement, and that we don't simply carve out and say, well, you are national, you only occupy this very rarefied policy space. And so that was also a concern. The question of whom will you attract to be a constituency MP? Right now, the constituency MP by number is the greatest number of MPs. And so we want to make sure that there's continuity and that we keep attracting people to that role. So the question of how we balance those three, if they are to be balanced and if they are to go forward, did come up. There were those who felt that constituency MPs can be challenged, and I dare say do currently also represent national policy level discussion. And so to what extent would national MPs be required? I will say I have clinics not on Wednesdays but on Thursdays because I know nobody from Cabinet is going to bother me on a Thursday afternoon, and I am free to do so. But I dare say that a lot of constituents also come to you to talk about policy. Before the estimates process started, one of the things that I did was to go on the road and to canvass my constituents about issues that would come up in the estimates, about financing of government programs, because I have nurses that are concerned about issues with nursing. There are people who have policy concerns that they expect their constituency MP to speak to. And to be frank, that is a purview that I enjoy along with the rest. So I just wanted to give the assurance that these things were explored. I am sure that in the written submission, Mr. Humphrey will perhaps flesh them out a little bit more. But I also thought it was fair to the commission and to the people represented here that we give an idea of what some of the other concerns were before the party considered that it would come to this position.
Please don't go. There's a question from the chairman who wants to ask a question of you. The deputy chair also has a question. So Roy, for whom is your question, please?
Okay, thank you. Will these changes have to be approved by the country first before they come into being? You heard me?
I did hear you,
Yes.
but I would consider that Mr. Humphrey would want to speak to that.
You sure, Kurt?
Yes, he's going to speak. I just want to be clear as well that this is the position of the Barbados Labour Party, having consulted with its membership. May I have the answer on the record?
Kurt, did you hear my question?
Yes, yes.
Yes, I heard your question, sir. And so just to be clear, I did not address this honorable gathering as the Minister of People Empowerment or a member of the government, but that this Labour Party was in retreat. We had our annual general conference over the weekend, and what we are proposing are ideas of the general body and the executive of the Barbados Labour Party before a commission that is asking for our ideas on what is potentially possible as we build out going forward. It is not a presentation of the government. So to say that we will canvass it before the country as a government policy, this is really the position of the Barbados Labour Party.
But, is that the answer to the question I posed?
Yes.
Whether these proposed changes will first have to be approved by the people before they come into being?
Yes, and what I understand, Chairman, Mr. Humphrey is saying to us is that these are the party's ideas, but that they will have, once the commission makes its decisions on the recommendations it is taken forward, Cabinet would have to sign off in the normal process, and whatever decisions are made would have to be canvassed by the country, by the government with the country, and the country would have to agree that these are the directions in which they would want to go. In the meanwhile, we enjoy the stimulation and the ideas and proposals. Yeah.
Thank you.
I like that.
I like that
So
too,
Roy.
Chair, because it's a very polite way, Madam Moderator, of your managing to help to answer the question of the chair of the meeting. I have two concerns, for clarity, I think, and I believe that both you, Ms. Minister and Marshall, might be able to help me. My understanding is that you are having some concern. I certainly am having some concern about committees. And I'm not sure whether you picked it up and you were putting it out there as something that has to be addressed as the Parliament continues for this term. The question of committees meeting and committees being able to satisfy the requirement to get the business done. I would like to hear you on that because I thought it was touched on, but for me it was not addressed sufficiently to satisfy me that the current committees are now able to meet expectations. But the second question that comes more to you, Minister, is a question of the committee system, as I believe you are envisaging that we will have committees building on the current initiatives that have been taken by the Prime Minister and the government in recent months. You spoke to, you're having 3 committees, and my understanding is that you were talking about more fully developing the committee system. Could you elucidate, expand, whatever you need to do to make the commission more fully aware of what your suggestion is regarding those 2 questions?
Just for my own clarity, in relation to committees, we're speaking of parliamentary committees, or the first question?
Well, the first one related to the current practice or lack of practice of the committees that we have, possibly brought on by the volume of the work that you have all been speaking about. But the second one is referring to the future development of committees.
So by training, I am a researcher. And I know there are a number of things that I know. I know, for example, that, we live in a time when people are asking more and more for data. We live in a time where people want a scientific basis to be the reason on which we voice an opinion. We live in a time as well where people often criticize the government for lack of consulting on these important issues. But we also do all these things in the context of a time where so many changes, as you outlined in your opening remarks, sir, are upon us, that it is incumbent on us now to respond now. And so it's almost an idea that finds itself in contradiction with itself, simply because people may be experiencing a sense of fatigue at the same time that people are demanding a greater level of accountability and demand that we consult at the same time. So while I appreciate that there are a number of committees, and there have been several committees, we've had several committees because the work before us is a lot. When we came into office and we look at, you pick almost any area of government when we first came into office. You look at the health sector, there were pressing issues that had to be addressed, required some consultation. Certainly in the issues pertaining to the environment and climate, again, requiring consultation. Without doubt, the issues in the social sector require consultation. Issues in the Constitution require consultation. Issue in relation to whether we should reform our parliament or not require consultation. And each of these things requiring that we make determinations now. I heard a wise man, much wiser than myself, say that we are only afforded 10 years. And within those 10 years,
Thank you very much.
within those 10 years, we therefore have to be able to do all of these things. I said the other day, too, that I know it was raised in the British Parliament, but Prime Minister Arthur used to say sometimes that he feels like an old man in a hurry, because there were so many things to be done at the same time. And so oftentimes these issues may affect the same people, sometimes they don't, but I understand what, as a researcher, I also understand what fatigue is, what respondent fatigue is. I understand that sometimes people get tired of having too much consultation or too much people coming to them. We also had, beyond these consultations, we had persons in the field doing the census while people were doing other studies. Barbadians feel that they've been, on one hand, we can point to a number of areas where we consulted, but on the other hand, a number of persons point and suggest that we haven't consulted. So there is that paradox. I think that at the end of the day, we were called upon to govern, and governing we must. Govern we must. And so we will consult where consultations are necessary. We will have the committees where the committees, national committees, where the national committees are necessary. I do not think that there's a single member on this commission who would think that the work that they're doing is insignificant. And I think that is the sentiment that will be shared by almost any member of any of the commissions that we're doing. So I think the work is important, and I will just ask Barbadians to bear with us as we bring a country to order. In relation to the second question,
No, go ahead.
In relation to the second question, I think, which is more parliamentary, committees, we discussed this. And this was one conversation we had great conversations on. We didn't present all the ideas. They said we didn't present everything. But like they do in the UK, we discussed not only part of the executive reporting and its accountability in relation to committees, but we discussed how they do in the UK now, where they have questions to the Prime Minister. And that perhaps it could also be questions to a minister, so that persons get the opportunity to weigh in much greater detail on a number of these issues. But there are some things that are so complex and so profound that they do require the interest and the attention of a committee. When I did the child protection legislation and the bill, I figured, to be truthful with you, when the government did the bill, that we had done significant consultation on the bill. We also had taken it from a place where the other government had started some of that work too. And so they had done with the stakeholders, not the wider consultation, but with the stakeholders some consultation. Then we had consultations, we had meetings, we had online committees and so on. Yet when the bill got to Parliament, there were persons who said they did not feel they had the chance to comment on the bill. And luckily for us, we had already put in place a system where we could send those bills, as we will send all of our social bills now to that committee responsible for social policy. And I think those who've been following would have to agree that it has been extremely beneficial, because in the absolute glare of the public, we were able to go through a bill, have persons make representations, and there were some proposals that I must say, even though we consulted before, brought great value. So I think, yes, that we should continue to have these committees as part of our democracy, that deepens our democracy, but we also may have to put in place other avenues like those questions, like the parliamentary questions that are posed now, but to put a structure around them so that when a parliamentary question is posed, it does not stay on the books forever, but that people respond within a certain time frame, just to be able to give the comfort. But again, it is all about being as accountable to the people as we possibly can.
Well then, has your, not the group, has the planning that you have envisaged, and are you ready to make any suggestion regarding how you could assist those current committees that may have challenges, how you might be able to put proposals to this commission that would allow for the commission's work to be expanded or clarified or further facilitated by having persons who are not in the parliament work with you on, if not all, some select areas to ensure that the work that is before you is in fact conducted.
I think, Mashi, come here.
Forgive me, but I was trying to think of an answer as I walked to the microphone. So this might just be me thinking out loud a bit. But what does come to mind is, for example, the question of the Auditor General's report and the question of the role of the Public Accounts Committee. Now, it occurs to me that there is scope in that area of work for partnership with people outside of the Parliament. I know some very well qualified people who are accountants, yes, but also deal with accounting in the realm of public finance and have a considerable amount of experience in that regard. And while we deal with this system that we have, where we have a 30-0 majority, we have to consider how we reconvene the Public Accounts Committee and what does that chairpersonship look like, whether we have a joint chair, one being an independent senator, another being a non-executive member of Parliament, whether we have a joint chair that then draws on some of the expertise of people from outside the Parliament as a standing Public Finance Committee, for example. These are things that are all under consideration. But it seems to me that this could be one of the ways that we give the public some comfort as well, that we are not just regulating ourselves, but that we're using resources outside of Parliament, outside of the executive, to make sure that we are fully transparent and accountable to the satisfaction of the people of Barbados. And I think there's similarly a role for a person in that regard to help explain the Auditor General's report and what it is saying and what it is not saying, because there is also that role. The Auditor General's report has a structure. It must fit that structure and meet that structure. And there perhaps would be a role within this committee system of public accounts to also have a person or individuals who are able to meet the public halfway in understanding some of these issues. So that comes to mind, yes, as one of the potential recommendations. But again, we continue to flesh these out and to write these down for your benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 283 people online at this time. I want to share with you some of the online comments that are coming in for the benefit of the party and for those in attendance. Reinventing the wheel. Democracy should be simple. A set date. I'm assuming the person means a set date for elections. Set choices and the choice of the majority. They asked a question about Kensington Oval, clearly not relating to parliamentary reform, so I shan't share that. A president with no power. Why do we have one? What about having a council of elders? Well-known and respected people in each parish should be also parish representative as well, perhaps the Council of Elders Committee. There should be a chosen set of senators and a set of elected senators. So like the American president is chosen, why we have a non-elected president? Well, the president is elected by members of the two houses of the parliament. Election financing, that should also be regulated. No secret money and levels of donations, no billion-dollar elections. I don't think we've ever had one, though. Graphs, pictures, and videos should be allowed to be used in Parliament by MPs so as to show what they are talking about. So how is a national MP process different from MMP? Proportional representation, which does the same thing. So those are the comments at this time from the 283 people online. Sir? You will need to identify yourself. I see you in a blue shirt and the predominant color tonight is red, but I take nothing.
Good night. But my heart is with the Barbados
I'm
Labour
just
Party.
teasing, I'm just teasing.
Yes, I'm Adrian Lewis from the St. Philip North Branch.
Okay.
And I have 3 questions. One is, I would like for you to explain, Mr. Humphrey, explain a little better what is the role of the national MPs? Number 2, will they be responsible for several constituencies? And number 3, is there a playbook that states what is expected of persons in that position?
Will national MPs be responsible for geographical constituency areas as well? And how, well, what was the last question?
Is there a playbook?
Yeah, well, in other words, what rules will they operate by? What will be their function?
Thank you. Thank you for those 3 questions. I will begin at the end and come to the top, if you don't mind.
Okay, thank you.
So in relation to the playbook, again, this is one of the things that we had a conversation on. We discussed to a large degree, no MP currently really has a playbook, right? Like, we don't have job descriptions per se for MPs. I know one of the things that they did in the Canadian system very recently was that as ministers are appointed, they're given specific job descriptions. Okay. But there are really no job descriptions per se for an MP. And while we were having our deliberations, we felt that perhaps something like that would be of benefit, not only for national MPs, but for every MP. So that persons, when they're holding their MPs accountable, they're holding their MPs accountable in relation to the work that they're supposed to do. So that gives me the opportunity to suggest to you that we feel it is important to have conversations around the work as stated explicitly for each MP at every level, including the national MPs. Would they be responsible for geographic location? No, because they're national MPs. So their job would be in relation to the entire country, but the MP for a particular constituency is responsible for that constituency. The national MP is voted upon by the entire country. So I just want to be clear, because I think this is perhaps where I perhaps have not communicated about, and I also know that it is new, and so it will be perhaps challenging to understand. I think we also have to write it down and convey clearer in much clearer terms.
So in that regard, the hour is late, and the Commission feels that the party needs to discuss this among itself. Are there any other commissioners with other questions?
Okay.
Because until it's fully fleshed out, I think that we have to be conscious that people are online and we don't want to send them mixed signals. I think that there will be an opportunity
and
to flesh it out.
we will share in more detail. Because I have already addressed it. I'll just be repeating what I said earlier.
Commissioner Dr. Chandler has a question. But we thank you, because we did want to get novel ideas and you didn't disappoint. Commissioner Chandler. So Commissioner Chandler will ask the last question on behalf of the Commission. Commissioner Beckles has no questions. All right, so Commissioner Chandler will ask the last question on behalf of the Commission. Sir Richard will make closing remarks on behalf of the Commission. Senator Farley will make closing remarks on behalf of the Barbados Labour Party. And the last word goes to the Commission with the vote of thanks by Commissioner McLean.
Thank you, Chair. So before I get to my last question, I just want to respond to the person who was speaking online in relation to saying that the system that the Barbados Labour Party is proposing with national MPs is the same as mixed member proportional representation. It isn't. Mixed member proportional representation is literally proportional, and it works on parties where you would have a distribution of national seats based on the party list. For example, if it was proportional representation by party list. In this case, it's actually mixed member majoritarian, right, which is on the first past the post system, which aligns with our system. So the entire system is actually first past the post. It's just different types of MPs at that point. It would be constituency MPs and national MPs. On the point about costs, it's a funny thing. I think Mr. Humphrey, being a person who has spent some time in academia, knows that sometimes in academic work, you spend a lot of time on an idea and it blows up in your mind, and then you realize when you actually start to write it down and work on it, it's not as big as you thought it was. So in relation to the cost, when you actually sit down and start to cost things, you realize the things that you want aren't as costly as you thought they were, especially if you're able to rejig things. I actually sat down and started to cost like all the different types of reform people are speaking about. And to be honest with you, it isn't as big as we start to blow it up in our minds, but it's to actually sit down and do the paperwork, which I know the accountants, et cetera, and the commission will do. The question now is in relation to that point about the mandate letters, for example, with MPs in Canada, when it comes to ministers. But in terms of MPs now in Barbados, people have been saying that there needs to be job descriptions for ministers, job descriptions for MPs. But what about a situation where MPs actually come after, let's say, 1 month of election, they recanvass their constituencies and present to Parliament what they believe their constituency is saying to them, probably within a fixed number of signatures, basically signifying their mandate to Parliament after the election. Well, I just put a month, but you could put what you want.
Well, thank you, first of all, for doing the math behind the scenes and to support what we're saying, that a lot of this is actually quite doable. I spend a lot of time canvassing, so does Marcia. Most of us do in the Barbados Labour Party. A lot of time canvassing, and the truth is, immediately before an election, everybody canvasses. The one time that you know your constituency, truthfully, is probably the first 6 months after the election, because much doesn't change between the election and the first 6 months or so. But I take the point that perhaps thereafter, really, there could be, and there perhaps should be, a point where we make a deliberate effort of systematically capturing what are the interests and needs of the constituency, and to be able to report on that. What we attempted to do as a political party, we said that every MP needs to do at least twice a year to have these meetings with the constituents. And the Prime Minister is insisting on it, that we have these meetings with the constituents where, again, they tell us what their issues are, what their needs are, what their problems are, how are we creating opportunities for them to advance, and that we report on that. But I understand your proposal to be a lot more systematic than that, and demanding of us a response as well. And we also discuss, I mean, I didn't propose it here, we also discuss recall. We said in our conversations that perhaps there should be a case where an MP who was not performing could be recalled by the people. But that recall should not be an easy recall. Now, this is one that we were discussing. We hadn't settled on it, but we were thinking a two-thirds majority at least to be able to recall an MP in that constituency, at least, of the voters saying that they no longer want that MP. But I think if we do these things, if we have these meetings, particularly a few months after, if we report to the people, and if your idea, I think, whether the party embraces it or not, I must tell you it is one that I embrace, and that is one that certainly I will do, which is that a few months after the election to systematically go back to the people and to see if I am able to address their concerns. But I also know that I say so as an MP and a minister and now a member of the Executive Labour Party, and I know that time is difficult. I also know that, again, we didn't get into it here, but I also know that that which is available to me at the constituency level is very, very limited. As a minister, as a member of Parliament, you have a constituency assistant whose job is to be in that constituency office when somebody comes. For those of us who are ministers, we have personal assistants, but they spend a lot of time with the ministers elsewhere. So you have really and truly at the Parliament, at the level of an MP, you have one person who's in the office. You don't have, like, when we were having this conversation with other MPs elsewhere, I'm sure any MP would tell you, those of us who've traveled and seen, that they normally have support systems in the constituency to be able to allow the MP to do his job or her job. But as an MP, you are expected to do all of that by yourself. So there might be a need as well, as we do that kind of work, to have the systems to support the MP to be able to do so. Thanks.
The only flavor I wanted to add, Mr. Humphrey, is that we also have to be mindful. First of all, when we, ahead of a general election, the word canvass, as we all know, really means to seek the views of constituents, not to seek votes. So you're canvassing to seek the views of constituents on a rolling basis, right? And so ahead of a general election, you're doing that to get you in good stead so that once you win, if you win, that you can hit the ground running to respond to concerns. Many of us, I know I did have a local manifesto, a constituency manifesto, that said, this is what I commit to doing based on what people have told me, and that is what I measure myself against over the 5 years, and that is what I report against to constituents along with the other things. But I also wanted to give a little bit of a glimpse of what we deal with. So I have a rolling set of concerns that relate to a range of issues. Housing, so NHC, Urban Development Commission, welfare, a range of issues. And these are household level concerns and community level concerns that we keep as a Bible. Now, obviously, I can't report to the people about household level concerns, but I just wanted to let you know that it is not to say that you are elected and then you run away and then you never interact with your constituents again. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know who does. But that you always have these concerns. So the idea of going back to your constituents to get a renewed mandate, you are always back with your constituents because you are always having to manage the ongoing questions that they have. But the only flavor I wanted to put was that an MP is only as effective as the systems of government and governance. Because an MP does not have a direct execution pathway. I cannot execute roads, I cannot execute housing. And so that's why I said in the beginning that all of this question of resourcing MPs to do better, and I agree with job descriptions, by the way, people have to understand what they should expect. But the only way that an MP, the only question of where the question of resourcing an MP to do better and expect an MP to do better can make sense is if the services of government are also given the wherewithal to do better, because the two work together. Now, we also had explored in our discussions the question of what is the level of accountability, not just of the executive, but of the public service to duly elected members of parliament. Because we are not just people outside knocking on the door saying, please, people elected us. And should there be some consideration given to having some measure of accountability between the executive and the public service together, and the parliament or the individual members of parliament. Now, I know that's complex, and it raises all kinds of other questions of interference, granted, but it is something that one has to consider, because if you're going to recall an MP, you got to recall an MP or not recall an MP within the context of what they have the capacity and the power to execute. So let's just be mindful of that. Thanks.
Hello, good night.
Good evening. Would you identify yourself, please?
Yes. My name is Steve Hunt. I'm known as the sheriff, and I got involved in politics in 2013 and 2018 elections, and that's why I'm here on account of what we are doing in the nation as a government. My questions to the commission or the committee based on the parliamentary reform. My question to you is that what do you see in Barbados that need to be reformed in the areas of the parliament? Do you see anything need to be reformed? That's one of my questions to you, the panel. And we as a people, what are we going to expect from the government in this parliamentary reform commission? We have to expect something from this, because if there's such a commission, you must be committed to something. And that something is to the people of Barbados, because we are ruled by a civil rule of democracy. And democracy is the main form of government in the world. So are we going to identify what is true democracy? Are we going to identify what is real democracy? Are we going to identify what we understand as democracy? So my question to you, what are we going to expect from you in this reform of the Parliament of Democracy and its best practice for corruption? CIA, corrupt internal affairs, and transparency. We are so opaque. You are as a parliament opaque to the people of Barbados. But you're going to bring topics like that to us, the people. You brought this topic up. I'm here to respond to what you brought up. So my question is, what are we going to expect out of this commission in the areas of parliamentary reform? And what do you have to say, or what you see need to be reformed in our civil rule of democracy in the nation of Barbados? These are my questions to the chief chair and to all who are sitting there as representative of this good people of Barbados. I stand for the rule of law. And in this reform, this is what I would like to see. The reform in the areas of politics and economics, in the areas of administration of national development, and the rule of law. And these are fundamental principles going forward, because these what makes us a people, a sovereign people ruled by the rule of law. So to you as a committee, I will engage you to think differently on all these preliminary things. We got to get down to the roots of the matter. Changes are happening all the time. We are at war right now, and that can affect our economy status in Barbados. But as a people...
May we have order, please? The gentleman is speaking.
As a people, we have been enduring and enjoying a stable civil democracy. And when it comes to the politics, economics of Barbados, we are there. When it comes to administration of national debt, we can see it. This is over 50 years of our independence. And the last 30 years, look how far we have come. From since 1994 until now. So I'm going to stop right here. But the reason why I'm here, because of the question and what you're putting forth to the people, parliamentary reform. And I've not heard anyone mention or answer a question based on what you come to speak about. She's talking about other things. But I really want to see what's the real meat of behind this parliamentary democracy and its state and system of governing a demographic of people. We know what democracy is. It means from the Greek word demo, or demograph, or demokratia. Speaks of the people. We are the people that you are governing, that we select you to govern over us. And we want a better service from the elected officials in this country, because you know that we are resilient people. And in that resiliency, I recognize we are treated very terrible.
Well, thank you very much, Sheriff, for
Thank you very
riding
much,
in with
sir.
your guns blazing.
Yeah. And that's
you
the
have-
357.
You have
SLW.
asked us to identify a number of things. What I'm going to identify is the time to bring the meeting to the end. What I would suggest you do is that you give us a submission with your very clear views, because you do have very definite views on a number of matters, and send them, please, to PRC@barbadosparliament.com. For members of the public, PRC@barbadosparliament.com. That is the address at which we are receiving written submissions from all members of the public, and from which, Sheriff, we would be happy to receive, and at which we would be happy to receive your submissions. Let me make two things clear. We have a terms of reference which were outlined at the start. We do not answer questions, because our role is to hear the concerns of the public, gather the recommendations and suggestions of the public, reflect on them, and distill them into a set of proposals which we will return to Her Excellency the President and to the Cabinet of Barbados. A decision will then be made as to what parliamentary reform could look like, and I imagine that there will be extensive discussions with the country and a public education process as to what any changes will be. But the Parliamentary Commission, we are the servants and the instruments of the public in the process of gathering information for reform. We are not answering questions, because this is not about putting our personal views or our personal preferences on the record. And with that, I draw this meeting to a close by asking the chairman of the Parliamentary Reform Commission to make his closing remarks, the chairman of the Barbados Labour Party to make his closing remarks, and Ms. Maxine McLean, Commissioner, to pronounce the vote of thanks for us. We have ended with 300 people online. Sir Richard, the microphone is yours, sir.
Fellow commissioners, members of the Barbados Labour Party, members of the public, it is my pleasure to close the last of our public sessions at this place, 111 Roebuck Street. It has meant a great deal to me from about age 16 when I became a member, a card-carrying member of this great institution. It is important for me in these closing remarks to acknowledge the assistance of the print and electronic media for broadcasting the work of the Commission. The Government Information Service has also done an outstanding job in supporting the Commission and in ensuring that our message reached the public. Our work is not ended, but the public sessions have ended tonight. The Commission still has a lot of work to do, including devising a code of ethics for parliamentarians and revisiting the terms and conditions under which parliamentarians serve. These are among some of the responsibilities which we still have going forward. I want to thank the public too for their positive and supported response. The work of the Commission would not have been possible without it. I want to remind you, though, that the Commission is still open to receiving and considering written submissions from the public as we work towards a report which has to be ready for submission to the President by mid-February. I want to emphasize and remind you, Mr. Minister, that we are very much expecting you to reduce your wide-ranging, if not radical thoughts, to writing, so that we will have the opportunity to reflect and consider them as we go forward. We have received, if I may say so, by way of recapping, a number of suggestions from the public that call for serious consideration. These included mechanisms for ensuring that we always have a parliamentary opposition, even if only in the Senate. Ensuring that Parliament is more inclusive by widening the interests represented in the Senate, the elderly, the LGBT community, the disabled, the youth, and so on. Implementing a code of ethics for all parliamentarians which will govern their conduct not only in Parliament, but even in the discharge of their duties to their constituents. Our Parliament has served us exceedingly well, especially since 1966. In fact, a lot of Barbadians are concerned to know why we are undertaking parliamentary reform at this time, because as far as they're concerned, if it is not broke, why fix it? What they did not appreciate, however, is that our Republican status called for us to remove the monarchical features in our Constitution. When once you reach monarchical system, as we reached two years ago, it was important that we remove the monarchical features from our Constitution. And so that was at heart one of the important reasons why we have to have this Parliamentary Reform Commission. And so this has turned out to be the perfect moment in our development to review what has gone before us in terms of our Parliament and decide what reforms are needed to be implemented to make our Parliament more consistent with our new Republican status. I am confident that we can meet the challenges ahead by undertaking the reforms which we have in mind and some of which you have been suggested by members of the public. And it is my hope that the Commission's work and eventual recommendations will not only highlight our proud parliamentary past, but also ensure Parliament's continuation and relevance into the long future. I just want to wish you all a safe journey home and thank you once again for the session we have had tonight, which has been among the most challenging that we have had, and from which we've got a lot of food for thought. Thank you, Mr. Minister. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Chairman Farley.
I could not, of course, end the night without thanking my first and second Vice President, whom you've seen tonight in action, Vice Chairman, who's Kirk Humphrey, first Vice Chairman, Marshall Cattle, second Vice Chair, you've seen in action tonight. But the third Vice Chair, whom you have not heard his voice, Kurt Haynes, he did a lot of the pulling together of the submissions and a lot of those, the essential tasks, which are not often seen, but they're felt. And Kurt has been the one, so our three Vice Chairmen have largely being responsible for us being able to add some thoughts to your deliberations. Let me just, as a wrap up, remind us all that reform and the need for it is not always or even necessarily a reflection of what has gone before. Everything could have been perfect before. However, the objective conditions in which the very thing you're doing may have changed. The world around us has changed. So any plan or proposals to reform our parliamentary system is not a reflection on how bad it was before. Any proposal to reform education, not necessarily a reflection on how bad it was before. But very often, the world has changed. We have blockchain and AI and whatever, climate change. And we therefore, we can't predict, we don't have a crystal ball. We can't see the future. But neither are we permitted to ignore the signs that we are seeing that may give us some guideposts into what the future could be. So I think that this, embarking on this Parliamentary Reform Commission exercise is really about trying to not just address the issues of the present, but anticipating what could be the needs of a parliament and what will make it fit for purpose and what will make the representatives of the people better able to serve the people, not just for now, but for the future. And we're really laying the kind of foundation for our children and our children's children that the founders of Barbados, the early promoters of democracy in the Grant Adams era, the promoters of independence in the Barrow era, has laid for us and we continue to benefit from today. So much of what we're doing to some may ask, if it's not broken, don't fix it. But can we afford not to take the opportunity to build forward, to build better for the future? So in that regard, I want to thank the Commission once again for taking time to come to a bunch of politicians. We politicians are never easy. A rambunctious bunch we can be sometimes. But in all seriousness, we really have tremendously benefited from the opportunity to share. I also want to include in my thanks to the 3 vice chairs. There are some members of what we call our Constitution Committee. And that group, some of whom are here, has been the one that has looked at our submissions to the Constitutional Review Commission. They've looked at our submissions to the Parliamentary Reform Commission. And again, this is one of the benefits of political institutions. They create opportunities for inputs on several different fronts across the board. So, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for also coming to our 111 Roebuck Street. And if it's your first time, please don't make it your last time. We are happy to see you, and we expect to see you even more often here with us. Thank you all once again.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to give you a little anecdote. I promise not to detain you long. But sometimes we underestimate how special Barbados is. Last night, we were at the Democratic Labour Party headquarters and were treated with the same kind of courtesy. And I don't think I will embarrass him because of the nature of his personality. Present in the audience was a person who put very vigorous proposals to the commission. He said to us then, I am here speaking in my blue shirt tonight, and tomorrow night I can be at BLP headquarters in my red shirt. And here he is. There are many countries, Mr. R. Edwards, a former constituent of mine. It may seem like a simple thing, but there are many countries in this Caribbean and across the world where that could never have happened. Bajans, salute yourselves. For the vote of thanks, Commissioner McLean.
Thank you very much. And I will start by thanking the executive and members of the Barbados Labour Party for receiving us, the chairman and the members of the Parliamentary Reform Commission. And I thank those members of the Barbados Labour Party who are here in person, and the interested Barbadians who have followed online. The last count we got was 300 persons, I believe. And indeed, on that note, I want to thank Barbadians who have continued to follow the work of this commission over the last approximate 5.5 months or so. To those who presented, I think you would have been led by Minister Kurt Humphrey. You shared your contributions, and I am happy to say that the last two public meetings have been pretty vigorous in terms of contributions, styled slightly differently. We had several presentations last night. Of course, making the proceedings possible are the members of staff of Parliament, those directly involved in the work of the Commission, and they were identified earlier, but I believe in the audience there were some other staff members who were supporting them. To Ms. Bonnie Leons, who was interpreting for the deaf community and has done so over the multiple sessions that we had, I say thank you on behalf of the Commission. To the team from Oversight, who made the streaming possible, and I believe I should thank the commissioners. We have all been present at the entire series of public sessions, and that calls for a lot of commitment on their parts, because that says nothing about the whole day meetings we've had and so on. Finally, I believe that this is indicative of the commitment that Barbadians as a whole have to this process. And so to anyone who has not been identified specifically, I want to say thank you very much. And on a personal note, I understand that there is hospitality, but I came here from a family funeral, and so I will be very brief in my stay afterwards, as you could appreciate. So thank you very much. The Commission, as the Chairman said, will continue its work. And to the gentleman who asked, our commitment is to reflect in our presentations the positions of Barbadians and not necessarily our thinking as a Commission. That is not our task. Our task is to solicit inputs from persons, and we look forward to receiving your submission. Thank you very much.
May God bless Barbados. Good night.